Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. We're going to be moving on to lesson 16 today. There was no lesson 15, it was a writing activity, so we're just going to skip over that. Day 16, we're going to be focusing on cause and effect, and we're going to be reading chapter 2, Xenia and Helen Cherosky. Okay, and these were natives, they were not white people who had moved westward. Our first vocabulary word is influx, and flux means flowing. So, influx is the arrival or entry of large numbers of people or things. So, when people started moving west, expanding west, there was an influx in the population. A prospector is a person who searches for mineral deposits, especially by drilling or excavating. So, a prospector would be someone who searches for gold. We've been learning that good readers continue to compare their own lives to the lives of the characters in the book. And so we've been looking at the Yukon Territory in 1897, and we've been comparing it to today, the lives that we live in Massachusetts. So today I'm going to teach you that good readers pay attention to cause and effect relationships, and they think about how one event in history impacted the people and the environment at that time. So the cause we're focusing on this in this lesson is the gold rush, and the effect we're going to learn. We're going to find out what the effect of the gold rush had on the environment, like the land and the people there, both the natives and the people who had expanded west. So we're going to read chapter 2, pages 22 to 27, and then we're going to look and talk about the effects that the gold rush had on the people and the land. So as I'm reading chapter 22, I want you to be thinking about how did the gold rush affect the people and how did the gold rush affect the environment? Okay, so chapter 2, Xenia and Helen Cherosky, the Golden Sisters. Gold, whispered Xena's father. Your Uncle Pitka and I discovered gold. It must be Lost Preacher's Creek. 11-year-old Xena was thrilled. She and her 5-year-old sister Helen had been waiting several weeks for their father at a trading post in Tanana. Many times she had listened from her bunk as her father and mother and uncles talked about the old Russian priest. He had traveled far up the Yukon River many years before and had returned to her grandfather's trading post at Nolato with a small pouch full of gold nuggets. Xena knew as well as everyone on the Yukon that no one had ever found the Lost Creek again. But Xena could not tell anyone about her father's new discovery. He wanted to keep it a secret, or else white miners would steal the claims. So in the fall of 1893, the family boarded a small steamboat and moved about 100 miles up the Yukon River to a place her father knew called Old Portage. There, a trail from the river led to the new gold claims. Xena and Helen were used to moving. Their parents, Sergei and Irina Cherosky, were descendants of the Russian fur traders and native Athabascans. For many years, they had worked as translators for Jack McQueen, the most famous white trader on the Yukon, and his trading posts up, down, and down the long and mighty river. So her parents didn't just search for gold. They also worked as a translator, and they also worked at the trading post that this person, Jack McQuestion, had all up and down the river. When they arrived at Old Portage, the men cut tall spruce trees and built a cabin. So they're cutting down the trees from the land to build these cabins. Xena and Helen gathered piles of soft moss and stuffed it between the logs to keep the cold out and the wind. Soon they had a snug home for the winter. Still, the cabin was small and lonely. There was no trading post and no children. The family had brought few food supplies, so the girls and their mother busied themselves with fishing under the ice, drying meat from a moose that their father had shot, snaring rabbits, and sewing new fur clothing. Despite their efforts and secrecy about the 100 white miners had followed them, hoping to get in on the new find. Early in March, just before the snow melted, the family hiked nearly 60 miles through low swamps to the gold diggings on Birch Creek. When the frozen creek had thawed and the water ran down the hills, the girls watched their father and uncle set up the solace boxes in the middle of the gravelly stream. The men spent all day, week after week, shoveling gravel from the gravel bars into the solace boxes and be washed by the creek water. When it was time for cleanup, the men stopped the flow through the boxes. Xena and Helen could see tiny nuggets and flakes of gold in the black sand trapped behind the rifles that were nailed across the bottom of the boxes. Other men were discovering gold on the nearby creeks. Soon, word came that Jack McQuestion was building a trading post to get supplies to the camp. The new town was called Circle City, with a full moose hide poke of gold. The family walked almost 100 miles to the new post to buy much needed supplies. In Circle City, Xena and Helen met up with aunties and uncles and cousins from downriver, and friends from the other trading posts, like the McQuestion children and Crystal and Monty Snow. Residents of the new town believed education was very important. They raised money to build a school, and the U.S. government sent a teacher, Anna Fulcomer. The new log cabin school opened in October 1896. Xena and Helen studied with 30 other students. They had no books, so Miss Fulker made up lessons every day on the blackboard. The schoolhouse was so cold they had to wear their coats inside most of the winter. In the spring, all kinds of bugs emerged from the moss between the logs. Then, one special day in May, the students heard a cracking and groaning of the river ice. Everyone in town ran to the riverbank to witness the dramatic breakup of the Yukon River. Huge cakes of ice rose up and smashed into each other onto the shore as spring meltwater flooded the river. The ice ran downriver for nearly a week, and then it was gone. Soon, great steamboats arrived with the first mail and supplies from the outside since the fall freeze. So the big river finally was starting to thaw out so boats could come down and give supplies, which they couldn't do before. They had to walk and walk and walk to get supplies. Hundreds of new people arrived to get in on the gold strike. So if hundreds of people are coming now on these steamboats, right, even though there's supplies, there's a huge influx of people. The girls stayed busy helping their mother with her sewing business, but their father, Sergei, did not profit from the influx of people. The miners had cheated him out of his mining claims. Many miners felt that natives should not be allowed to own and operate their own claims. Sergei could do nothing about the conflict, and he became very bitter. Before long, Sergei and Irina divorced. Sergei returned to his traditional home in the village of Koikukuk, but the girls stayed with their mother in Circle City. So because they were natives, a lot of the white people said that they should not be allowed to mine just because they were natives, and they weren't allowed to stake their claims on a part of the riverbank, which led to a lot of conflict, and Xena's parents ended up leaving each other. In 1900, at the age of 19, Xena married Nels Rasmussen, the Danish immigrant. They ran a packing business using a large string of horses to bring supplies to the miners out on the creeks. Nels built a 2-story log home, and they raised a large family in Circle City. 13-year-old Helen moved to the new boom town of Fairbanks after Irina married Packer. Helen helped her mother start a sewing business there and proudly finished high school. Later, she worked at Alaska Roadhouses and many other jobs. She traveled once to California to visit her aunt Kate Soniskin, her mother's sister, who had married a white miner from 40 Mile. Helen never married. Her happiest years were spent teaching with the missionaries in the village of Fort Yukon, north of Fairbanks. Okay. So this is a handmade dress that that Xena's family, their sewing business, had made. And this is Xena's family. You can see that. And they also put a picture of an old sewing machine so you can see what that looked like. Okay, so in the story we learned that Xena eventually married and that her husband ran their own packing business. So this is a new word here, packing business. And what made their packing different? They're a packing company, right? Packages things, puts them in boxes, and takes them to where they're supposed to go. This is kind of what they did. So packers helped gold seekers carry their supplies over the passes. So they would help carry things over a certain amount of space. And this became a common job for natives during the time of the gold rush because they were told they weren't allowed to mine for gold. So let's look at the cause and effect. So the cause is the gold rush, right? And the effect is that the people was that it gave up jobs so they gave up their jobs to become prospectors. They moved to where they might find gold. Businesses profited from the influx of people. So businesses made more money because most of them did, because of the huge influx of people when the river thawed. There was a conflict between the natives and the white people about staking claims. And native people became packers, so they would help carry things instead for money because they were told they couldn't stake claims. And now children received an education. The effect on the environment were that trees were cut down to build. New towns were being built like that, right? Boom towns. And schools were being built. Trading posts were built and towns grew. Okay. So today and every day, I want you to pay attention to the cause and effect relationships. Comment with one effect that was caused by the gold rush, okay, in the Yukon Territory. So it can come from this list, it can come from the reading, it can come from things that we've talked about in the past, but what's one effect? What was one change that happened to people or the land because of the gold rush, okay? I hope you guys have a good afternoon. I just made some banana bread this morning. It just came out of the oven, if you can see it up there. So we'll have to try that. I miss you guys. I can't wait to see you. And thanks to everyone who logged on today and did Jeopardy on Zoom. That was so much fun. And I can't wait to do it again. Bye, guys.